when we think about psychedelic therapy, it can be very valuable for lots of people. So we kind of like want to spread that into the world more. And that's why like the designs and brands I've worked on, we came for more like it's not fully like a medical aesthetic, it still has that touch of the spirit from the psychedelics. You try to more professionalize it, and having a very professional website really helps in that way. When the design feels polished, it feels like a professional organization, people will look at it differently. Sometimes you only have one chance to make a good impression, and it really helps to kind of like put it in a better light, because now there are a lot of stigma around it. And if you have a very good organization, it's very open about everything and just wants to make it safer. Yeah, it's a very necessary thing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychedelic Conversations. Today we have Rimbout in the house. Welcome. So good to have you.
Hi.
Nice to meet you as well. This is going to be our interview also to get to know you, Rimbout. So really appreciate this time that you are spending with us. Just for the context, I would say a few things about you for our listeners to get a background of who you are. So you are a psychedelic content creator. That's how I know, and that's how I connected with you. But you are a branding expert, Webflow Wizard, and you have an extensive skill set, I believe, in the content creation, which I'm very interested, and also experience with psychedelic content creation, something that I wanted to dive in with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Sure.
And before we can take off, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are joining us from, and also what brings you to this content marketing in this specific area. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, so I think it's a good place. So yeah, I'm Rimbout. People can call me Rimbo, and I started my own design studio called Rimbo Designs. And like when I graduated, I did like a design school, communications and multimedia design. I kind of already kind of like had the urge to start for myself, but then I went with a friend to like a psychedelic retreat. I already had some associations with psychedelics, but then I met Glenn, who already worked at bigger agencies as a designer and like senior designer. And he went freelance, and he was doing this design stuff for the psychedelic space. And I found it very cool. And then I rolled into the opportunity of being his apprentice. So that was like a nice, after graduating, growing my skills as like running an agency, doing design and development work. But that's kind of how I rolled into the doing work for the psychedelic space. And then I helped like Psychedelic Passage, who's like a big organization in the US who matches the people that want to do the journeying with psychedelics, but want to have a guide. This organization matches you with the right guide. And like an information hub, Mushroom Tao. And Mushroom Tao is a retreat in Costa Rica. And tripsitters.org is like a information hub to learn about tripping, how to grow shrooms, how to become a guide. That was kind of like the start of my post-graduation career. Been working on my skills ever since, and having more projects come on. I started to spread also like a bit outside of that sector, but I definitely still in the psychedelic sector.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it's a beautiful, I guess, space to develop your skills. Especially if the future will be psychedelic, then we will be needing more content creators like yourself. because it's a very specific skill, and I'll tell you why. So when I first started the podcast channel several years ago, I needed an editor as well, and I was looking for someone with the skill to edit these podcasts and take kind of like a big part of the work to edit and in that supporting role. And I came across somebody, and I want to give a big shout out to Rowan. He's great. Rowan Lillian. He's my editor, and he is behind this podcast. Like, he's been the anchor. He's been my rock in terms of really holding it together, because he just understood it because of his own background and experiences growing up as a young person, experiencing psychedelics. And he kind of had an idea, and that kind of connected us. And every episode that he edits and listens, and I know that he tells me that it helped him grow in it, like educating him and gave him so much, like informed him in a way that was very helpful. So thank you, Rowan. So we want to mention you here. And so that's why I value so much young people when they come in. And I think there should be an opportunity. There should be a space for young people to bring their skills into the psychedelic content creation, just because those of us that are out there on social media, as you can imagine, you probably can share some feedback with us, how sensitive it is out there. And if you want to position yourself as a psychedelic educator, there's so many obstacles, like there's algorithmic red flags and strikes, and there's so many things that you need to navigate in order to be able to consistently continue with this kind of channel. It's not the usual channel. That it's a very, very specific work and commitment, and sometimes it's really hard, honestly. But luckily, we only had one strike so far on YouTube. And that was resolved very quickly. But you can imagine, you can be deplatformed. And sometimes, like, I have friends and colleagues who have big channels on Instagram and some of the social media platforms, but specifically Instagram and YouTube can deplatform you very quickly. If you kind of catch the algorithmic web, right? So what are your thoughts, and maybe, like, what do you see as a challenge?
Yeah, look, first, it's like this insecurity of being banned is definitely like blocking the space to grow. A lot of things are also still very underground because like certain things are just in the gray space, not fully legal yet. But what I focus on with my branding is usually more like how do we position this in a more professional way? Because we are thinking about people that would probably haven't never done psychedelics. And what I saw, like looking at like hundreds of websites that are in the space, usually they didn't have that much budget or investments into the visual identity and the websites and stuff, but they all kind of went for the more spiritual aesthetic, and then it kind of contains into a bubble of only the very highly spiritual people that enter in there. But when we think about psychedelic therapy, it can be very can be very valuable for lots of people. So we kind of like want to spread that into the world more. And that's why like the designs and brands I've worked on, we came for more like, it's not fully like a medical aesthetic, it still has that touch of the spirit from the psychedelics, but you try to more professionalize it, and having a very professional website really helps in that way. When the design feels polished, feels like a professional organization, people will look at it differently. And sometimes you only have one chance to make a good impression, and it really helps to kind of like put it in a better light, because now there are a lot of stigma around it and you don't know. But if you have a very good organization, it's very open about everything and just wants to make it safer and more reliable and improve approaching psychedelics for everyone. It's a very necessary thing.
Yeah, this is very helpful. So the professional and the visual aspect of it is very the key.
Yeah.
You are saying. And do you also feel like maybe there are organizations that may look like professional on their website, but not really professional behind the doors? Do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe,
Mhm.
it's a very tricky area to navigate, right?
Yeah. For instance, with Psychedelic Passages, where an organization where they match the 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 guides with the people that are looking for the the a guide to go to this together with more professional backgrounds. But then they have like a more ethical process of kind of like screening them, and then you start to have a better understanding of who your guide's going to be. But like online, of course, you have always have to be a bit suspicious of like what's real or not. But if you have a very good story, you can also really hit on the authenticness of it. If you use video, for example, instead of only text and pictures, and you can implement video testimonials, you can really put the authenticness and the trustability on the foreground of like things you can't really fake. So yeah, but I think there should be also more organizations that kind of like screen people and have like a professional badge or something. So organizations like that should also be more, because like yeah, it's such a sensitive space. If you go on psychedelics, like you have therapy, but you have psychedelic therapy where you just kind of like it's even more sensitive. So ethics and like how to approach all these things become more and more important. One of my clients is Sandra Dreisbach, and she's a professor in bioethics. And I really like her mission and helping her, because I do see like the ethics are just so important, and they're like she's like a moving force in creating organizations that's keeping everybody accountable and having people, yeah, just the accountability aspect of it in the space is probably a very essential thing that needs to grow.
Yeah, I agree. And I think due to the outburst, or maybe we should say the expansion in the mainstream of
Hmm.
psychedelic, you know, like the approach, I think it's becoming more and more common now that a lot of people are online.
Hmm.
And maybe because I'm in the sort of psychedelic bubble, because when you're in it, it's hard to see
Hmm.
objectively. So you might think that everyone's on psychedelics, but they're not. Obviously, the whole world isn't on psychedelics. And there are a group of us that are in the space of education and trying to be online safely. And therefore, I think it's a good thing. The more out there, the better, because it's going to polish up the efficacy and all different aspects, the integrity. And I mean, it just reveals, you can tell from the energy of how they put out. That's why I always thought that social media aspect is very important, just because, like you said, you cannot hide the authentic energy that's been projected, especially in videos when people talk about it. So I hear what you're saying. So as a young person, how do you see the future of psychedelics? Do you think something's really progressing, or are we still kind of like circling around like the revolution times?
Um, yeah, it's like I probably also would be a bit in a bubble, but actually, it's like in the Netherlands, it has been legal for a while, and I, I feel like it's at least where I live, people can really talk very openly about it. Um, Also, like even older people, like my mom was also very interested into it when I started doing this, and then she even did it. But I think for most people, it's like start small, like microdosing. And I see like most social media ads and kind of like things are more targeted towards the more light version of like starting out with microdose. Although I think the very deep transformational stuff is also on the higher dosages. But yeah, it could just have a profound impact on people that are kind of like sucked into their tunnel of who they think they are, and then kind of like this can just open their mind and see that they might be attached to very lot of baggage and trauma, and just kind of like to be able to let those things go or find happiness, or like, yeah, there's just I think it mostly when I look at the medical space where they treat mental health, and like I have a brother that had like a psychosis and stuff, and it's like how they treat him with antidepressant and antipsychotics and like all this stuff they put into people. Then I really feel like something natural like psilocybin is a way more natural, healthier solution. And I've heard so many people that those solutions they use now are kind of like they just kind of like block the thing that needs to happen, and they might have like an intenser experience on the psilocybin, but then they feel like actually that it's a lasting change. So yeah, I think there just needs to be more awareness around uh, different options, and but it has to be implemented carefully. Like if it's becoming too commercial, too big, maybe we probably also start to abuse it in ways. So I think we have to be very careful with it. But yeah, definitely. I feel like it's for me, all my experience with psychedelics, it makes me more in touch with myself and happy, and always makes me feel good. And I don't feel it's that addictive because once I have a psychedelic trip, I usually have a few months I don't really feel gravitated towards it because they are quite intense.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for sharing the personal story of your brother as well. Do you think that when something like that happens in the family, it kind of pulls the whole family together? And you mentioned about your mother also being open to it. Do you
Mhm.
think it's like something happens in the family and then it kind of triggers everyone into like more coherent dynamic, more connectedness? Would you say it's almost like people come together around this thing that happens in their family?
Mm, I don't know if it's like in my family per se, but in community for sure. Because I've had like I went for to that same event like maybe 6 times or something, but it became kind of like it felt like a bit like a family one when you're there. We all were wearing like animal onesie pajamas, and we were staying for a weekend somewhere, and then we would all together. It's like my previous experience with psychedelics would just kind of be like with a good friend or something, but I do feel like when I trip with a lot of people, the trip is like you have a social uh psychedelic experience, and after that I actually wanted to do it alone. So if this like solo experience, and there's just a lot of like if you do it solo, you go very deep internally, but if you do it with a lot of people, you actually become a lot more aware of your social interactions, how you interact with the world and with other people, and you have more mirrors. And I think if you would do it with your family together, you also probably, um, yeah, you deepen connections. That's for sure.
Does it
Yeah.
trigger a lot of different things as well to the surface?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you definitely quickly go into deeper conversations and kind of like, yeah, you might be a bit of a if you're sober, you probably more of a service level because it just deepens your emotional feelings and state, and like a lot of I end up in a lot of philosophical conversations as well. But yeah, you make different connections that you usually never see. So
Do
yeah.
you think psychedelic practices could be a family affair in the future? Maybe like families trip together, stay together, for example. What are your thoughts?
That is interesting. I mean, I have two brothers, and the brother that had psychosis I never tripped with, but my other brother I tripped together with, and but yeah, it depends on how tight the family feels, and it could be. I think it's very niche. Would probably be very niche because I mostly did my psychedelic experiences with friends, but I think it's a niche thing that could be very valuable. Like you have family therapy, why not trip together? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, because we have, like the baby boomer generation who
Hmm.
grew up with maybe the recreational when it was kind of a lot recreationally out there
Hmm.
back in the day. And then we have like another generation where they had parents, from the revolution. And then when it was shut down. And then we also have like you guys very much younger. And I feel like we can bridge all
Hmm.
these generations together if there was some kind of a movement that can start. I know there is a lady in the US, I think is psychedelic microdosing moms. And then like I am aware there's some kind of movements are happening around psychedelics to bring it to family.
Hmm.
But I think it would be so helpful. It was a bit like the Mazatec tribes. There is a Mazatec tribe. I'm not sure if it's still practiced now.
Hmm.
When a child becomes 5 years old, they do a family initiation.
Hmm.
So the child, the siblings, the parents, grandparents, if there's any uncle and aunts, they will do like a whole family gathering
Hmm.
and they'll take mushrooms together.
Hmm.
It's fascinating. I think it's already happening somewhere around the world, but in our Western world, it would be definitely a niche approach, but it would be so helpful, especially now when young people feel disconnected and misunderstood by their parents.
Hmm.
So they're kind of trying to figure out life in their own ways and they have anxiety. They deal with a lot of anxiety, right? That's a new thing. It's like the latest thing that the young people, they have social anxiety, they have all different things that struggles. Maybe bringing their parents into their world and vice versa would probably be very helpful.
I think if I would go do some psychedelics with my parents, it would probably be a good thing. It would probably strengthen my relation with my parents. I think yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm curious about what do young people think about psychedelics, for example?
People.
Like your age, I mean, what you know so far from your own experience, from your
I think
friends' experience.
there's quite a bit of like it's like mostly used in a in a fun setting, but usually it's not as party. It's like usually we do more like arts and crafts and chill. It's a bit separated from the party scene. I mean, yeah, you can be on a festival taking psychedelics, but then it's a very certain specific festival where that kind of like I guess that matches that. It's different than the other drugs that are a bit more destructive. I think, and I see that because I also once I go more psychedelic, I enter into a bit more new age hippie kind of like communities where people are very open-minded and they kind of like very deep in touch with themselves and like they seem very healthy. um and yeah, I kind of once I once I'm starting to take psychedelics, what kind of people that attracts or what kind of communities I kind of roll into by doing that. uh I meet very interesting, very nice people there. And but then like, can you repeat the question? So it was, how do the young people think about psychedelics?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you guys perceive? Because when I look at my age group and above, it's all about the healing. There is this really strong approach with the therapeutic and clinical
Hmm.
healing modality. But I am very aware that young people, very casual, very, it's normal and it's probably more creative for them, a creative aspect that they are interested in. I'm not sure, but I do, I don't think you guys worry about the healing part so much, the trauma and the healing, unless something is kicking off there
Yeah.
serious.
Well, like I do experience the healing, but I think usually when I take it, maybe I do have some intentions of things what I want to take out of it. But a big part is also just kind of like want to have a good time and just experience it. And usually I do some arts and crafts, but then subconsciously it really feels like a very therapeutic healing experience, but I don't go into it seeking therapy. I kind of go in there to have a, yeah, kind of like get in touch with myself, have fun, and yeah, I kind of, it's a bit casually approached maybe, but it is very therapeutic, and I guess that we approach it maybe less intentional, we do experience the same healing, I think.
Yeah, maybe less expectational. Like there is not much, a lot of hopes have been put on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Just
like
like
some, yeah,
curiosity and exploration are more the core drivers, like curiosity, exploration, and just kind of like uh yeah, just seeing it
exactly.
as an adventure maybe.
Yeah, makes sense because, like I said, sometimes people are suffering hugely with, psychosomatic symptoms and some mental health challenges. And there is inevitably, there's a lot of expectation put on it, like as this is the only thing is going to help. Otherwise, it's like there is no way out. And that creates a lot of disappointment, you can imagine, creates a lot of negative feelings around it. So I'm guessing what I wanted to say is that, if, let's say, do you see a future where we can incorporate this into society so that the young people can come into it quite early, so that, like you said, you may be exploring it for curiosity and creativity, but then simultaneously receiving the therapeutic benefits? It's happening all at once.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, that's for sure. That's kind of like why I help, like helping these organizations that are more educational about it. Because I just kind of like talk out of personal experience, and I see people going into psychedelics around me. But I like helping these organizations provide very professional information about the integration, the importance of the integration process, and how to prepare, creating the right setting and environment, and uh, like what to expect, how to being just super prepared going into it. And I do feel like people get guides for it, probably get a lot more out of it, because I feel like the stronger your intentions and the more like guidance there is, and like you can take so much out of one trip. And like especially if you have a very good integration process, where maybe you have like some calls afterwards, or like some talks about the experience, really going back to what you got out of it, and just kind of like taking that with you in your life. That's way more than just kind of like casually with friends you're maybe in a house in the forest for a weekend, and then someone has an idea of like, hey, what if we do shrooms? And then you're like, yeah, sure, let's go. That's this just kind of like happens. Then you happen to have a bit more fun, casual experience. But if you approach it more professionally, uh, there's a lot more you can get out of it, and you really reduce all the risks, because there is also like risks to it. You can have a bad trip, but like how to, yeah.
This is a great point. In that approach, there's more safety, there's more harm reduction, and there's more, avoiding the risks that it may come up. That's a great point. So I have a question for you. Coming from Netherlands, how did that inform you as a young person growing up in a country where it's kind of there all the time? There is not like
Yeah.
any other countries. How did that inform you in the way that you think about them?
Yeah, like the Netherlands does have a weird thing in a way, because it's like I walk that way and there's like a coffee shop where you can buy weed, and I walk that way a minute and I have another coffee shop, and I walk this other direction and there's like a smart shop, and on the other side of the street is another smart shop, and I'm like, I can buy mushrooms there and I can buy mushrooms there. I could literally run there and run back and be like only gone for like 2 3 minutes and have a box of mushrooms. So it's like uh in a way it's like that's probably very rare, probably very Netherlands thing. but I didn't do mushrooms, I think, until I was 22, 27. So it's been the last 5 years that I explored a lot with psychedelics more. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I kind of always had a bit like it was always around. Well, I think it was more with for me. It's more problem with weed being always everywhere here because I'm not responding that well on weed, but it's like almost everyone around. If I chill a lot, I chill a lot with artists and musicians, and they all kind of like do it. So it's like, but with psychedelics, it's a bit like I don't see everybody like constantly doing psychedelics.
Sounds like there's more mature approach. There's some relaxed approach to it.
I think people don't seek psychedelics every week, every month. That's more of a, I think for most people, a one time a year type of thing. And then the more they like it, the more they might do it. But it's, yeah, for instance, microdosing, you can do way more, but like doing a bigger dose is, I think people know that it's quite intense to do a big trip. So, and not everybody likes it. Some people I met I just don't really like it. They did it once and they didn't really like it.
Yeah, this is great. It's not for everyone, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, thanks for sharing that. So, as we're approaching the end of our conversation, I'd like to ask you maybe like you can give us a few tips on the branding this specific type of content
Yeah.
around psychedelics. If you have anything that you might want to share with our listeners,
Yeah.
that would be so valuable.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, like organizations I help, they kind of lean into SEO, which is like search engine optimization, to be found in Google because there are way less restrictions on YouTube. You probably get flagged way quicker and like that. So that's a bit of a safer marketing route for most organizations. And I also experienced trying to set up email marketing for other organizations, and then they, yeah, directly got banned. And like a few weeks ago, I talked to someone who actually does the email marketing for these organizations, and he uses Klaviyo. So I haven't done it yet now, but I now know next time I'm in that situation, I'll probably gonna try Klaviyo because it seems to be more friendly, and they probably don't ban you for uh, talking about psychedelics. And um, yeah, I think also just in terms of positioning your brand, just try to empathize a lot more with people that never done it before, and kind of try to be more open in the ways you communicate and do your visual identity. Um, but maybe you just only want to work with the very spiritual people, then it makes sense. But um, the stigmas around it and all the ideas around it that can kind of scare people off that have never experienced it. So if it's a bit more of a professional looking side with, yeah, just a strong messaging as well that kind of directly guides them to like um a microdosing guide, or like for beginners, just try to be very beginner friendly. Yeah, and I think LinkedIn is very I was like I'm on Twitter or X and LinkedIn, but I seem to connect with a lot of people in the psychedelic space on LinkedIn. So I think LinkedIn is a very good place to just kind of talk about what you're doing within the space. There are a lot of people to connect there. On Twitter, they might be there, but I haven't been there as long as LinkedIn. So trying to figure that out, but so far, uh, way less than LinkedIn. So I can recommend LinkedIn, having a very good website, using Klaviyo for email, and having a blog, because if you're being able to be found well on search, also has very little limitations in like being banned and stuff. So I guess that's my tips and advice.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So the blogs and the email marketing, it's interesting you said that. I think it was Stripe that banned us in the beginning as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's the way it is. So it's good to be able to still navigate, and there's still loopholes that we can navigate safely. And also the intention behind it is to bring so much more education and information. So that cannot be a bad thing, to be honest. It's worth the risk sometimes. So where can go on.
We
Continue.
fall and learn and find the new best ways to spread the information. So yeah.
Yeah, I know there are so many friends and colleagues of mine. They're so convicted. They're willing to take the risks, and it comes from an activated internal place where people feel so cold that they do push through the risks, I guess. So
Yeah.
So where can our listeners find you if for any inquiry, anything that you may be able to help with, that help for them for their branding, not just psychedelics, but you also do any type of branding, anything along content creation?
Yeah, so my expertise mostly around branding, the visual identity, the logo, but there is also just kind of the content strategy. I go into like the purpose, mission, vision, and like really get to understand people very deeply before I create the the visuals, and then I also very skilled with Webflow, so I can develop very high-end websites, and you can find it on rimbodesigns.com. And I'm also active on LinkedIn and on X, Twitter. But yeah, especially if you want to check me out, you can find everything on rimbodesigns.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll add your bio and your links and your social contacts in the show notes as well. This has been very valuable and helpful. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And hope you guys enjoyed this interesting conversation with Rimbout. And it's so good to know that young people are out there also supporting the mission, or the psychedelic renaissance, we call it, to bring about the education and the message in the most helpful way. So I really appreciate what you do. Thank you, Rimbout.
Thank you.
And I'll see you guys on the next one. So drop a comment, get in touch with Rimbout if you're interested. If you're a psychedelic person who's been on the fence trying to create something or start your branding, I have a feeling Rimbout is the person. So thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.